Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for the orientation today. I want to start with the Committee of the Women's Guild to welcome everybody. Come on in.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Irene Caprito, and I am Vice President of Education for the Women's Guild of the New Orleans Opera. It is our pleasure to welcome you to our orientation, headed by Todd Simmons, and he has developed this format which seems to be very successful. Following this event, we have our refreshments, and we have made it kind of a tradition with my committee and the committee before that, to have themed refreshments. So we have Britten's Pub drinks in the back, and then we have delightful refreshments over there that I think you get a kick out of it if you only just enjoy the main taste. But it's really been a lot of fun. We enjoy doing it. We hope you enjoy the orientation, which I'm sure you will, and will attend the opera and continue to support the opera. Thank you very much. Oh, my committee, here they are. We have Betsy Dowling, Kate Furr. We call ourselves the FDC caterers from the opera.
For God's sake.
Then we have all of our wonderful support staff, which are also members of the Guild. We have Joan F. Holt holding the water for the speakers. Then we have Rosanette, who met you at the door with reservations. We had Merrill, who was working in the kitchen, and Pat Merrill, who was also working in the kitchen. So we hope you enjoy all of our work, which we have enjoyed doing for you. Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Please give just 1 second so I can give y'all guys.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Joe. Well, we are here to talk about Britain's Noah's Flood. I'm going to start by going down the table and have each person introduce you and tell you either what their role is or what role they play in this production. Starting with Carol.
Well, I'm Carol Roshan, and normally I'm the chorus master for the productions. In this case, our chorus is made up of 86 kids from schools all over the metro area. They're all over, we have kids from the North Shore, we have the West Bank, and all over New Orleans, and they're being taught by individual teachers there. So my real role was just to contact teachers and line up these groups, not to teach them the music, and we will meet them for the first time tomorrow.
Excellent.
I'm Victoria Livengood, and I am Mrs. Noah. And I actually called my brother, who's a Southern Baptist preacher in Tennessee this morning, and I said, was her name mentioned in the Bible? Did I miss that? I went back and read my story. I have no clue what my first name is, but I'm Mrs. Noah. And I'm awfully glad to be back here. I was trying to think what year I was here last, and it was so long ago I can't tell you. But I did sing in the Magic Flute when I was still in my 20s. And that was 30 years ago, so I'm really glad to be back and glad that Robert asked me to come back and join in this special presentation.
I'm Veronica Sharkey. I am Mrs. Jaffet, the wife of one of Noah's 3 sons. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be a part of this. It's going to be a really wonderful production, I think.
My name is Kameron Loe Priori. I am a senior at Loyola University, and I play the role of Sam, which is Noah's firstborn and oldest son. And like Veronica, I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to be performing with New Orleans Opera, my first role, so yes.
Yes, first pro debut.
Yes.
And I'm Robert Lyle, and I'll be directing and conducting the production. So I'm looking for a lot of help from these individuals in putting it together, and also someone that needs to be introduced is Casey Duplechain, who is the production manager for the company and joined us this season and is doing a magnificent job in the ways that production managers do in facilitating the working parts of a production. And this one, which of course involves almost 100 children, and a bell choir and the youth orchestra and professional players from the LPO and pianists and organists and faculty members from Loyola University and the recorder ensemble from Ursuline Academy has lots of individual participants, and so I'm sure she'll be up to the task in coordinating all of these individual moving parts.
That's a really good jumping off place, is kind of between you and Carol. When this began, how did you, I mean, normally you cast the shows, you cast the chorus, so LPO comes as a group. None of that happened with this. Tell us a little bit about how you picked all these. I mean, how many schools are represented in this? There's so many.
There are about 8 or 10. I honestly started with people that I knew. I mean, it's like what you do in any field. You start with people that you know. I would like to particularly say our host site is Trinity Episcopal Church. And I cannot, Veronica is a member of their adult choir. We've gotten major support from Trinity, not only letting us do the rehearsal process and also the performances there, but Albinas Prisgintis, who's their wonderful music director, will be playing the organ part for this. We have 10 kids from Trinity who are under the direction of Anais St. John. She's actually, if you have been to the beautiful new Hyatt, she's a jazz singer who performs regularly there, but she also teaches music in the schools. And we have the bell choir from there, and we have the support in all ways, and Casey has worked very hard with that. Different parts of the church have been loaned to us for various and sundry things. But I started with people that I knew. Kids are very busy these days, and sometimes you would get a situation where kids were committed and it looked like there were going to be a dozen, and then it was down to 4 because people had soccer and so forth. But we're thrilled to have 86. I mean, I think that's still going to be a very big group there. And as far as the orchestra, Robert really had much more to do with that, and I'll let him explain the split between pro and amateur.
Benjamin Britten, first, let's begin with acknowledging the fact that Benjamin Britten is being celebrated this year. It is the centennial year of his birth, 1913. And he is, I would say, unquestionably regarded as the greatest English composer, possibly since Henry Purcell. Now, it is a modern musical language, but it is a very tonal musical language. And we can talk about that in the context of how he uses Anglican hymnody in this particular piece and many of his other works. But the idea started with a conversation between Carol Rausch and myself about producing Noah's Flood as a smaller scale production that the Opera Association might present to celebrate, to participate in the Britten Centennial. Britten also was trying to achieve something very specific with this work. When you see it mentioned, you'll notice it always says it is a modern setting of the Chester Mystery Play. The Chester Mystery Plays were cycles of liturgical dramas. There were several cities in England that presented these cycles, and often the name went after the city. But the most famous ones were those presented by the township of Chester, and they are presented to this day. And this tradition dates back to the late 1300s and 1400s. So you see how old these liturgical dramas are in their English language versions, because we actually had a specialist that pointed out to us that this is the language of the mystery plays is in fact the basis of modern English, and that it is not Old English like Beowulf and writings that are the foundation of our language. but that they were actually a pretty sophisticated precursor of Shakespeare. And so we're actually dealing with modern English, although it just sounds old. So but these plays were done by the townspeople, just as almost all liturgical drama was during the period, and they were done in very special ways. The one thing that I learned in studying about these is that the word pageant comes from the cart that carried the players around the city. So they would go to this church or to this market or to this location on their pageant and present their play. And you note in modern context what the word pageant means. So it was not designed specifically for professional players. These were tradespeople. These were just citizens. These were church-going public that knew these stories, would memorize these lines. I would say the closest parallel that we have today, apart from the mystery plays themselves in England, is the Passion Play of Obergammerau, which now is done every 10 years. It's a fixed text. It is a huge honor to be asked to play one of the characters in that famous liturgical setting. And the same thing held true in the 15th century and in the 16th century when Britten was drawing on this material. He also wanted it to be a mixture of amateur performers and professional performers. The music is not... He has simplified things for young players, for children, to be able to perform. But he has also written a piece that is very beautiful and very technically sophisticated for professional players as well. And so that then immediately suggested that what we would do is invite the Greater New Orleans Youth Orchestra to accompany this. Our annual contract is with the LPO, but Britten said, no, get a youth orchestra to play, and then you supplement it with the professional players that do the solo work, so that you do get a nice balance of sophisticated playing and something that is decidedly more amateur. And then he also designed what is certainly one of the most charming parts of the entire production, and that is that the children are invited to be the pairs of animals that go into the ark. And that is where the process began that Ms. Rouse just described, in which she approached many schools. And the response was very positive. Teachers saw this as a wonderful opportunity for their children to get involved in what we've been calling a community-based production. So we do have the youth orchestra, we have the LPO, we have the Ursuline Academy Recorder Choir and the Trinity Bell Choir. And it's this amalgamation, if you will, of all of these different performing forces, along with the 86 children. It's kind of necessary to have them in pairs because, remember, the concept is that Noah is saving the pairs of animals so that they can be spared and then they can repopulate the earth. And so the text is very, very specific, but it also invites the opportunity to have children assist in making their own animal costume. Sometimes, and the people that I've asked, the kids, they say, I want to be a porcupine. Probably tells me more about that child than the animal. But obviously porcupines came from somewhere, so we needed to have them on the ark. Here, I don't want to dominate all the time.
I want to go back a little bit on something you said. Could you give us an example, or maybe one of the principals give us an example of what the text will sound like? I understand because I think Shakespeare, I'm not for sure I know what it is. Actually, Carol has a score.
Well,
Will we be able to understand it?
Indeed you will.
Yes.
And we will have projected titles. Now, what I have chosen to do is to render the titles into modern English. So you will be reading a modernization of the spellings, and there are a few lines in there that you actually have to go to the dictionaries to translate. When she says For all thy Freinish fare.
Yeah.
For all thy Freinish fare, I would as lief thou'd slept. A line like that,
Yeah.
what is Freinish fare?
I had to look it up. I admit it. I'm from the South. We don't say Freinish. But it means polite.
Right. And it
So-
means polite in the sense that it's related to the word Frankish, which was French in its origins, and that's kind of stylized manner that the continent, the British, looked at the French, and that made its way into liturgical drums with that kind of expression. And there are a few words that I just had to go back repeatedly to early dictionaries to try to find out exactly what was being said. But will you understand it? Yes, you will. But they will be speaking the original language from the Chester Mystery Play. You've probably seen some of our advertising, and Norman Robinson, who's a very well-known media personality, a wonderful resonant voice, will be the voice of God. You won't see him, but you will certainly hear him.
He'll be bowing, right?
Oh, I'm sure he would. Yes, he would. I mean,
God gets the last bow.
it's always good to let God
God.
bow. And last bow too.
Exactly.
Well, Mrs. Noah, why don't you talk to us about the fact that there really is no basis for your character. Who are you?
Yeah, well, this is unusual because usually we have these types of things after we've at least had a rehearsal or two and figured out what we're going to be doing, what the plan is, is DOE pronounced do or do, that kind of thing. So I literally just got off the plane from Charlotte Friday and sang with your symphony last night in a Wagner concert. So we jump in trial by fire tomorrow. But, obviously, it ain't Carmen, which is the last thing that we did together in Grand Rapids in an ice hockey arena. So I'm not expecting for you to ride in on a horse, which he did, or for me to dance with castanets on the ice. But now that I am changing my repertoire, this is a new role. I have a lot of new roles this year. And you wrote me, I think, this summer, and said, I was in Phoenicia singing Wagner, and he said, I've got this idea. How would you like to come and try this out? He said, it's a lot of fun. You have this funny scene when you're trying to get all your gossips on the ark. And I think, well, that sounds, like loads of fun. He said contralto, more fun. And he said funny. And so it just sounded like it was right up my alley. These are the types of new roles that I'm looking to add to my repertoire so that I can continue longevity in my career now that I've retired my castanets. So I'm really looking forward to adding Mrs. Noah to my list of wonderful characters.
Great. Now, our children of Noah, tell us anything you can about who your characters are.
Well, Sem and his brothers are very, very strong characters in the show. They insist that their mother come into the ship because of the storm, and in that way, they don't ask her. They don't say, "Please come in." They say, "Open your eyes, look at the wind, come inside, please." And they're very strong characters, and they're very specific. And some of the most fun that I've had performing the role is to look at how Britten himself is such a musicologist in a way, and the way that he paints the text and the way that he paints the Old English, it only supplements the way that the character feels in terms of the way that it's sung in the throat, and as well as the way that it feels emotionally. It's easy to connect to the character because of the way that the orchestration matches the text. And in that way, it's been incredibly easy. It's been so much fun to work on so far. And I trust that this show is going to be, it's not like most opera. It's not your Puccini. It's a change from the ordinary, and it's going to be a blast. And I don't think that New Orleans Opera or anyone is going to do it in the state for a while. So this is an opportunity for people to see a work of art that I think a lot of people should see.
Yeah.
And same with the Noah's Sons' Wives. much like their husbands, they're sort of very strong women. They're like, all right, we're going to build this ark. I'm going to make a fire and cook dinner. You're going to go get this. We're going to do these things and make this happen. So, that we can sort of continue living, in contrast to Mrs. Noah, who's like, women are too weak to work.
Yeah.
I don't feel like doing anything. And we're very much sort of get up and go people. But like Cam said, the music is written, there's a lot of imitation going on, but at the same time, each character has their own sort of spin on things, so that you recognize it, but everyone's a little bit different, and it makes, like he said, it does make it very easy to sort of connect emotionally to your character and be like, all right, so, I'm feeling this way right now, and this is my motivation, and what's going on. But yeah, this was a once in a lifetime chance to perform this, so I sort of jumped in with both feet. So
Literally.
literally, yes.
Now, you were just talking about the painting of the text in the vocal lines. Now, Robert, you and I, we've talked about the same thing for the music. Before that step, I think some people think of Britten and they think of 20th century music. They don't know anything about Britain's music, but they assume 20th century music is aggressive tonally, and this piece really isn't that way at all, is it?
No, it's not. It's, again, at the risk of repeating myself, the hymnody is the basis of Benjamin Britten's musical language. And in some respects, it is the foundation of all of the music that he wrote, of his 16 operas and lots of other instrumental music. He, like many British musicians, grew up in the Anglican Church with its traditions of boys' choirs and an emphasis on a certain kind of treble singing and very, very tonal. And yet he is a very significant contemporary composer, so naturally he wants to explore the language of modern music. And has anyone here ever heard the War Requiem that Britten wrote? It is truly one of the monuments of 20th century music. His possibly most highly regarded opera is Peter Grimes, which is also considered a landmark accomplishment. But you find that this very tonal musical language that is made interesting with dissonance is the core of his language, even to the extent that he wrote 3 operas that are called church parables, and that those were settings of a play called Curdle River, but also The Burning Fiery Furnace and The Prodigal Son. What he did was travel to Japan and study how no drama was created, with its highly stylized, densely distilled kind of theatrical gesture. And then he wrote settings of these 3 plays using Anglican plain chant with very exotic orchestrations of small chamber groups. But that language of hymnody is such a central part of his musical thinking. Let me back up and just reinforce. See, I have had the advantage of looking at all of the parts of the opera, and so I don't want to skip over the fact that in talking to Vicki, with whom I did many Carmens over our various careers, that when I was writing her and saying this is really a great little play, Mrs. Noah is comedy, we need your theatricality, and it'll be a lot of fun. It is also very celebrated for what is a body of very serious drama. Abraham and Isaac is the second most famous of these liturgical dramas. And so, those of you that are steeped in the language of the church know exactly what these stories are. And we have assumed that this being a very church-oriented city, that people will know what Noah's flood is all about. Now, when you get to the actual telling of the story with actual characters doing it, it takes on a whole new dimension rather than just a biblical account in which God said it's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. But the character of Mrs. Noah is unique in that entire body of the cycles of the mystery plays for being a comic character. You know, much of these biblical stories didn't invite much in the way of comic considerations, and so the creators of Mrs. Noah back in the day of the 1470 something, when these things were actually notated, found, I'm sure, great amusement in presenting the conflict between a husband and wife. Mm-hmm. And look at the consequences. I mean, God speaks to Noah and says, I am so upset with mankind for, as he said, my creation is set full foul in sin, and I have decided to destroy that which I have made, a cleansing of the palate, if you will. And so what I want you to do is build an ark, and here's how it goes. It's going to be 300 cubits long and 50 cubits wide, and there will be a side on it and a window, and he starts dictating the architectural terms of the ark, which we can find in the Bible, as you know. And he turns to his sons. By the way, Noah at this time was 900 years old. You know, so when we look at the span that is mentioned in the Bible, the ages of Sem, Ham, and Japheth, the sons, those were born when he was 650 years old. So if you've ever thought about having children late in life, but wow. Yeah. So, and you know, the character that immortalized by Gershwin, if no one else, Methuselah lived 900 years. Well, so did Noah. But the dictate comes from the Almighty that you will build the ark, and as an act of grace, I am sparing you and your wife and your sons and their wives from the peril of this flood. Mrs. Noah, and he calls, and his sons dutifully respond. Sam says, I've got a hatchet, and Ham says, I've got a hammer, and I've got an axe, and the three sons are there, and the wives appear, and they want to help. They say, we can bring timber, we can find plaster, I'll build a fire to make it possible for you to work on the ark. Mrs. Noah comes, and as was mentioned, says, women are too weak to work, but we want to contribute something. Besides, I've got my gossips with me, and we've all got big jugs of wine to drink. And they mock the process. Yeah. And so I'm sure what was to the medieval mind, just as it would be today, the idea that a man is saying to his wife, get in this boat, you're being given an opportunity by God to be saved. And she says, no, I like my gossips, they love me full well, you have to take them with you. And he says, that's not part of the deal.
And I box his ears. Yeah, as you do.
So the confrontation between Noah and his wife is, I'm sure, symbolic of many universal issues about human relations. But it is a comic scene that ends happily, because he does say to his sons, go get your mother. And they literally bodily carry her in.
Yeah, and I'm looking at him going, I hope the other two are a little bigger. You know what I'm saying?
Right. But the characters are interesting, and they are individualized in their way. Now consider that when these works were performed on those pageants traveling throughout the community by tradesmen, then to be the one that jumps up and says, and I have a hammer and a pen, and I can use this to drive the lumber. When I have an axe and I have these things, they represented what these workmen's guilds were as well. So in that respect, it's little bit of a forerunner of the closing scene of Die Meistersinger, where all the city's guilds come together to show their wares as well.
Carol, you're feeling
Yeah,
better,
I'm good.
okay?
It's going around.
Tell us a little bit about the children, the role that the children are in this show.
Well, one thing I wanted to say, I hope I'm not saying something that was said when I was out there. Cam and Veronica and all of the sons and their wives were originally children's roles, as were her gossips,
Yeah.
who were drinking, and carousing and as being naysayers against the whole process. And Robert really wanted to have young adults be in these roles, and it's a very different sound. And among the things, first of all, I feel like our people, we have really excellent people that can do these, but it also kind of sets them apart from the children, who then have the charming task of just being the fun animals. These sons of Noah call the animals in. There's literally like a little trumpet call, and here are lions, oxen, goats, and so forth, and they come down two by two singing Kyrie, Kyrie, Kyrie eleison. So their part is really kind of fun, and they also contribute to the hymns. There are three major hymn sections. One at the very beginning, the congregation is involved. When the storm comes, just as a community like New Orleans would do in the wake of a hurricane, many people gather and sing a hymn for protection. They're afraid and they're calling to God. And then when there's a happy ending and the rainbow comes out, they sing sort of a hymn of praise, and the children are involved in that too. So these roles are actually, we also felt, kind of difficult for kids. We've been in rehearsal for the last couple of weeks, and there are some tricky spots, and we feel comfortable having those handled by adults, so that the children can be the animals and be in a more childlike, a classic kids chorus, let's say, type of situation.
Great. Now, the audience has to sing as well, right?
Yes. We've talked a lot about how we're going to handle this. There certainly will be an insert in the program, but the conductor literally turns to the audience and conducts them along. They're familiar hymns, and the text will be up on the super titles. The first one is one that people of every denomination, I think, will know. Lord Jesus, think on me, and so forth. So they're familiar hymns, throughout many religions, and they're going to feel. I think it will feel nice to be a part of the action, but you are not simply a passive observer. You are part of the process when this happens. So.
I'm actually working in my office on the little inserts
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now.
That's his.
So that you all have little sheet music in your programs that you all have got to get up there and sing, and we'll be watching to see whose mouths aren't moving.
Sometimes you are directed to stand, just as you would in the course of a church service. Again, in many different types of denominations, you're asked to rise and sing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Now, Robert, we were talking about the orchestra. Would you talk a little bit about the way Britten uses the orchestra to represent the animals and the sound effects?
Well, opera music is by its very nature representational music. It's program music, if you will. And Carol mentioned the storm. Let me elaborate a little bit on the use of the hymns. Lord Jesus, Think on Me is the first hymn that the congregation sings while Noah comes down to the altar. And then we have a famous mariner's hymn during the storm when the boat is being buffeted by the waves and the wind. And this is what the sailors would sing, begging for protection from the elements. And then the closing hymn is O Spacious Firmament. And that is once the sun has come out and we have the covenant, which is quite beautiful. As you know, biblically we learn that God said that the rainbow represents his covenant with man, that he will never again choose to destroy the earth through water. And so the hymns that are sung are actually a part of the plot. I mean, and it also is what invited me to think, since they are in very modern English, that using titles that rendered the text into very modern English, even though you will hear it sung in the original language, would be a comfortable fit. But the forces that he calls for, and it is a rich palette of sound, is for strings of different types, orchestral strings, violins, violas, cellos, basses, of different levels that he has written for children to be able to play and for professionals to play. And then you have the support of these hymns with organ and recorders. And then in the storm scene, you have a very large percussion department almost that has exotic instruments that Britten created for this piece, one that he called slung mugs. And that is what he did is he personally went around Aldeburgh, which is where this work was premiered in 1957, and he found porcelain mugs, coffee mugs, that each had a distinct pitch until he had a chromatic scale. And then he tied them, the handles with string, and hung them up so that they could be played like a xylophone. And it's really quite a beautiful sound. It's not like a typical orchestral instrument. And he uses the whip, and he uses sandpaper, and he uses the wind machine, and he uses the gongs, and the cymbals, and the timpani, and snare drum, and triangle. So you can see there's a huge array of percussion sounds. And they all come in pretty handy during the storm, because you're wanting to create the sense that there are great waves that are, and we have to do some things visually to create those. I will say this, Britten hearkened to the simplicity of the original productions, with townspeople presenting them. He said, you don't want to go overboard in costuming, you don't want theatrical lighting necessarily. What he wanted is a very subtle balance between the role that you as an individual of the congregation would play in a church service, and yet it is a drama. So you are both an actor and a spectator. And that the children should wear their normal clothes. We'll do actually a little more than that just for the visual effects. But that everything should be simple. Everything should be obvious. And that's why he didn't want it done in a theater, but in a church. And so we're trying to take advantage of the generous hosting of Trinity to frame the work beautifully like that, because to end up, hopefully I can light that stained glass window that's above that altar so that our rainbow will enhance a look like that in a beautiful way, and the covenant with God then becomes very, very visual, with bells coming from heaven, ostensibly actually from the balcony, but along with the bugles. So it's such a beautifully crafted piece, but rich musical language and very tonal.
I will say I heard the timpanist last night when we were doing the Wagner concert. They were kind of freaking out about finding these mugs to play.
Right.
He really was like, that's such a challenge,
Right.
I can only imagine.
Are they glass mugs? Glass mugs?
Or porcelain, or china, or whatever works to create that chromatic
Sound,
state.
yeah.
And speaking of the stained glass windows, some of the stained glass windows there are from Tiffany.
Ah, even
Beautiful.
nicer.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
They're really lovely windows.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful church, and again, there's something.
Nice.
Again, you can enhance all kinds of special effects in a theater with all the technical apparatus you have there. The challenge is to make it of a piece in a church in the proper setting and do what you can with that. And using the children, again, not a lot of union stagehands to push things around, but to engage the young people in the creation of the piece in the same way that they would have back in the 15th century and 14th centuries.
That's something we haven't really talked about. Could you say something about that the sets, who we're working with for the sets and the costumes?
Well, we have invited NOCA's theater department to join us, and they are responsible for helping create the look of the ark, which has to be assembled on stage, and the waves, and the sun, and the moon, and the stars, and the rainbow. And that their students, Dan Zimmer is the director of that department at NOCA, and he said he loves to use this as a teaching piece, and that when I approached him about joining us with this, he said I would be delighted to do so, and I would like for us to actually be able to create them instead of just design them, but actually have a role to play in the creation and execution of them, because he thinks that would be the most complete involvement that their theater students could have. So that's another very major institution that will be a part of this production.
Okay, I want to open up to the floor for questions from you now.
Have any of the other dramas been put to music?
Britten set Abraham and Isaac,
Okay.
but that,
And it was also one of these 14th, 15th century dramas?
yes.
Very different musically, though.
Very.
It is more aggressive.
Yeah, it's
totally a lot. But then again, the story is pretty much
Right.
a much more angst-filled story. Pat?
This is written sometime between Chaucer and Spencer, I would guess.
Right,
And it's not from London, it's from the countryside.
right.
How are you, did you get somebody in to help with pronunciation?
Right.
At least an English major.
No, I mean, I think I think those of us that have worked with some of Britten's pieces and this kind of language can probably get us past it. I did ask one of the professors at Tulane, is he Loyola?
Loyola, actually.
Loyola, I'm sorry, to write. One of our promotional pieces mentioned Old English, and so he sent us a very gentle correction that said, well, actually, it's closer to the foundations of modern English. And I took advantage of that to turn it back to him and say, you know, I think a wonderful contribution to our program would be for you to write an article about the evolution of the English language and where these mystery plays fit within that. And he wrote a lovely essay that you'll find in the program booklet that, you know, basically says, here's Chaucer and here's Shakespeare and here's where these mystery plays fit in the continuum of that.
But Chaucer isn't pronounced, I mean, it's easy to read if you forget pronunciation, but it's not pronounced at all.
Right.
What the score says, just to clarify, is the text used in this work was written at the end of the 16th century. The old spelling has been retained, but modern pronunciation should be used throughout. So that's kind of the compromise there. You can get most words. It's only these things like Frinish and, you know, that words that we don't use anymore.
Well, and you find this musical settings that Britten has chosen for select words, like shippa.
Yeah.
He gives you two notes to sing, and so you're kind of forced to use the more antiquated pronunciation.
Yeah, bring a timber too.
Yeah.
And it's not IPA. We, as singers, you know, I sing in 8 languages and I talk like this. So, I mean, what we learn is we learn an international phonetic alphabet in college. That is absolutely our main tool in preparation. Me not living in New York, I have to prepare most of my roles, Russian, Czech, all of that on my own. So when I get this is one of the harder things I found to prepare on my own, because it wasn't in the International Phonetic Alphabet, and it had a schwa with an umlaut over it, like German, and I didn't know whether that would be an bringe or bringa or bringa, and it's tricky. So again, tomorrow I'm sure there will be little finessing going on to line up all of our vowels. For the singing, you said that it all. When I was doing a Midsummer Night's Dream production at the Metropolitan Opera, we had a dialogue coach, because again, even that, and it was much more accessible to us, was tricky, and they wanted the entire cast to match up with our accents and our language. And I was playing a goddess, and Hippolyta, and all of that mythology, and all of that gets complicated. So even when people go, oh, the opera's in English, that's easy. No, not necessarily. Sometimes the hardest things to learn.
Right.
Okay.
I just want to make an observation. Robert prepared a lecture on this opera that I think was sent out to all the subscribers on a CD that had lectures about all 4 of the productions in this season. And I listened to it and I was absolutely amazed at the beauty of the music. And if you haven't listened to it, if you're a subscriber and got it and didn't listen to it, I recommend that you do listen to it, and you will be all the more encouraged and eager to see this, and maybe do what I've done, and that is I've ordered tickets to go a second night.
Oh, great.
And show it to you. Have your friends listen to it too, who might say, Britten, I don't want to see a Britten opera. Yeah, but listen to what it's like.
That's it. The only ones who got that were those who had not subscribed yet.
Oh.
So that was their trying to turn the key on. So, however, if you go to the website, all 4 operas, they're about 20-minute kind of lectures with music examples that explain everything, tell you the plots, give you the sounds, excerpts, and you can listen to it. But most importantly, you can share that with your friends. So you can kind of demystify what is Britten. Because once you hear it, I think you're going to be really surprised at just how easily accessible this really is.
Most of the people I met last night at the reception after the Wagner concert all knew about this. They were excited about it. They were like, oh, we got you tonight because you're in town to be Mrs. Noah. They had all that figured out, and there was a lot of buzz about it, I thought. People were very excited. And a lot of people told me they were coming twice. So, anytime you put that many kids in something, you're going to have a good crowd. Trust me. And a porcupine? Come on.
And Louisiana animals.
I think the other nice thing about this is it's not like sampling a Britten opera that's 3 hours long.
Oh, right.
This is a little under an hour, and I think you will go away. We are hoping that you will go away saying, gosh, I'd like to hear what else he wrote, because this is so charming and so pleasing, and I enjoyed it so much.
One special thing about this show is that, along those lines, that the ticket prices for this show for single tickets are significantly reduced. Right. The most expensive seat in the house is, I think, $60.
$65.
Wow.
And then it goes down from there. And there's a special children's $5 ticket.
Wow.
So
that's fantastic.
So it's a really, we've priced it to really try to make it an opportunity for anybody to come. There are also 3 performances. Usually we're only on Friday night and Sunday afternoon. We have an additional Saturday night performance added to that as well. So there's a lot of opportunities to see it. The price barrier is very low, and so it's a great chance for your friends who may not have been able to convince to come see the vampire. Maybe Noah would be the perfect thing to get them involved. Any more questions? No.
Oh, just one comment is that the word for drowning and a victim of drowning in French is noyé. And I realized, because I'm a French teacher, but I didn't know that. And when I saw noyés fly, I thought, oh my God. Wonderful.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank the whole panel for being here today. This is going to be a great show. A really great opportunity for people to see something they probably haven't ever seen before. And thank you all for coming. You have plenty of chance to get some snacks across and chat with some people some more. And we'll see you at the opera.
Yeah.
Yes.